Hello, Jim here. Selling options is a great way to make some extra cash every month. And my favorite trade for earning just income and not worrying about owning the shares is a vertical put credit spread with IWM. Today I'm going to talk about that strategy. I'm going to talk about how I put that trade on and why I use it and how it actually augments my income now and also through retirement. And be sure to stay to the very end where I'm going to share with you a trade I put on actually today. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in. Okay, just a quick market update. The CPI was in tune with what was expected, which has been unusual. It's been higher recently. And I think the PPI also has been pretty much in line. I believe that came out today. And because of that, the Fed did mention that they're probably only going to do one rate cut. I don't know that I believe them. I still think two may be on the table, mainly because with the politics and other things going on, I think there'll be a lot of pressure for two cuts. I think the first cut will probably be in September, with probably a follow up again, maybe in October, but it might be as late as December. So at least that's what I'm thinking. I could be completely off. And I do think those rate cuts will be a good thing for the market. I think because of, it'll help people, especially mortgage wise. And if you have any kind of payments out there or HELOCs, it definitely will have an impact, or even student loans. So that being said, let's jump into the main content. So what is a vertical put credit spread? So a put or selling a put is you're selling the opportunity for someone to sell you some shares and they'll actually pay you cash. Let's use for instance, you have a $50 stock, you want to own it at 45, someone will pay you for the opportunity to sell you those shares at 45 and actually pay you a fairly nice premium. Now, how does it become a credit spread, or why is it called a spread or a vertical put credit spread? It's primarily because at the same time, because you may be worried about the market, mainly because the market could, go through a tough time, could have a correction, or we may go through a bear market. So you kind of want to protect yourself. So you could buy a put at the same time as selling a put, and the purchase of the put will protect you, meaning if, let's use that same example. So the stock is 50, you sold the put at 45, you buy a put at 40 so that if the stock price goes below that 40, you can put those shares to someone else at 40. So you're only, the only piece you have to worry about is 240. So literally the spread and how you calculate, what the capital required is or what your max loss is you take the spread minus any premium, and that's what your max loss is. So in that example, if it was a $50 stock, you sold a $45 put, you purchased a $40 put, that's $5 times 100 because you always need 100 shares for options. So that's $500 minus whatever premium. So say you got $100 in premium, that would literally be a 400 max loss. And the only way you would typically get that max loss is if it went literally completely through, meaning the stock tanked and it went below $40. Now, what happens too that a lot of people don't think about, so again, when you're looking at the stock and you're wanting to buy it, it's currently 50, you're like, wow, I want to own this stock at 45. But then it goes through a tough time and it falls all the way, say, to 38. Well, what happens is that put becomes worth a lot more. You still get the stock at 45, but then that put that you had purchased for protection, say you don't really want to give up those shares, well, you could sell that put and then put that money towards those shares. So you might pick up, say, another $2, and that this happens all the time. So instead of your cost basis being 45, your cost basis is 43, meaning you've just picked up a stock at the time was $50 and you've recently just picked it up at 43. Now the negative is, well, it's probably still worth 38, but long term that stock's going to slowly increase, hopefully, because you picked a good stock and it'll rebound. Every stock I've ever owned, Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, 3M, so on and so on, go through rough periods, and at some point they typically will bounce, unless they have some major issues. I've mentioned before Lumen and Big Lots, some companies that I've owned that did have issues and they did not bounce back. But every company does go through tough times. So I believe if you do 10 trades, one or two are going to struggle. One may be a dud and potentially the other one will bounce back and do pretty well long term. And I've had that happen quite a bit. I also have noticed that a lot of stocks will go in and out of the money, and sometimes people will sell too quickly and they'll kind of lock in a pretty big loss. So my advice for anyone who wants to do these kinds of trades, just realize why you're going into the trade to begin with. Maybe it's not so much that, you're only looking at the price so much, but then maybe you also want the dividend. Say they pay a 4% dividend, and if you get a 10% off, that 4% dividend is suddenly, 4.4% or something along those lines. So remember why you made that trade to begin with. And it's also important to pick very optionable stocks that have lots of volume, lots of open interest, some volatility, so that they're easy to trade, because you don't want to get into a situation where you can't really roll, or enrolling is just literally closing one contract and opening a new one. You don't really want to get stuck into that kind of a situation. So when you're looking at a stock or an ETF and you're evaluating, you're looking at their debt, you're looking at their profits, you're looking at their growth, all the factors that make that a good company. But then also look, do they have plenty of options, plenty of strikes, plenty of expirations, enough volume, enough contracts, enough open interest. Open interest are just the contracts where people, have submitted contracts and they're open for potentially trading. It should be part of your evaluation process. And then typically what I like to do is when you sell the put that someone's buying from you and paying you for, I like to use what's called around a 15 delta. And that means that I have about an 85% chance that it will never get assigned to me, or a 15% chance that it would. So it's very low risk. Now, if you want to take even less risk, then you would do a 10 delta. If you want to take a lot more risk, then you'd go the other way. You might do a 20, 25, or 30 delta. And it does coincide with the price of the strike. So if you have a $50 stock and you do, a 20 delta, well, that strike price may be 47. And if you go with a lower delta, then that price may be 45. So the price coincides with the delta. So the lower the delta, typically the lower the price in the case of puts. And then I also, a lot of times, if I'm just selling a put, because you could also just sell what's called a cash secured put, I typically will always look at that outer put. I'll go $10 out and I'll say, if I'm trying to sell a $45 put, I'll go to 35 and then I'll look to see, well, how much does it cost? And then a lot of times you'll find it's fairly inexpensive, so it kind of makes sense to buy it anyway. And then I'll work my way backwards. So I'll look at a $9 spread, an $8 spread. So I'll look at 36, 37, 38. A lot of times I'll find that 38 is cheaper than 35, and I can even have a healthier spread. So something to keep in mind. A lot of pro traders, you wouldn't even be considered a pro trader unless you're buying protection. Again, protection in the fact that if the stock dives to a huge amount, that you're protected below that outer strike price. So, and then I do have a fair amount of guidelines that I like to do. One, again, is when I'm selling puts, to do like a 15 delta, but also kind of eyeballing the price, meaning if the stock is 50 and you do a 15 delta because it's only a week expiration, and that $50 stock, the strike is 49, to me that's too much risk. And even in a week period, or week expiration, 7 days to DTE, it can get to that point fairly easy. So I'll go farther out. I'll look at 2 weeks. If it's an expensive stock, then I'll look at a month, and sometimes I'll look at 2 months. Most of my trades are between 30 and 60 days, some as far as 90, especially with ETFs, because sometimes ETFs don't pay much. And I like to earn pretty close to $100 a share. I am going to back off that a little bit because I do want to take a little bit less risk with what's kind of happened recently in the market. It seems like the big boys are doing really well, and a lot of the mid cap stocks are struggling a bit. And then when you work with it, I like to consider, like I said before, a lot of times the position will go in the money, and that just simply means the stock price is below the strike price. So again, let's use an example. So you sold the 45 strike, and that stock goes down to 43. Well, you're in the money. Now, one thing I like to do is research my trades, and I found that most trades, unless they're more than 10% in the money, aren't going to be assigned or early assigned, because that's what you're worried about. You're worried about them being assigned to you when you're not quite ready to have them assigned to you. Maybe you're wanting to hold that cash for a little bit longer. So I typically don't worry. So in the instance of the $45 stock, I would look at 45 minus 450. So if it gets pretty close to that $40 stock price, then I will start to worry, and I'll start looking at maybe I need to roll it. And again, rolling is just closing your current position and opening a new one. Try to lower the strike price, or if I really want to own them and I think it's at a great price, I may not do anything, but at least I'm aware there's a good chance that these shares will be assigned to me, and I'm kind of ready and able to deal with it. And then there's some other management things that you can do. Again, it's if you've purchased a put, you have more choices. So if it does get assigned to you, you'll early, again, we're worried about early assignment. Now, if it's getting near the expiration, you also need to worry about that because it will be exercised automatically if it's in the money. But if it's assigned to you early and you still own those puts, then they're going to be worth a value, and then you have the opportunity to put them to someone else, or you could sell those puts and bring in more money like I talked about before. Or say you've done 4 contracts and you've picked up 400 shares, well, you could maybe get rid of or sell 200, sell the puts, and then keep 200 because maybe you didn't want 400 shares and now you decide you only want 200. So you have a lot more choices if you bought that protection. There's a lot of things you can do that you could not do if you were just working with a cash secured put. So let's jump into an actual real live example. This is a trade I made about an hour ago, and I'll talk a little bit more about details with it as we go. So stay tuned. And again, as always, if you would be so kind to please hit that like button and subscribe. I'm trying to get the word out. I want people to know that there's there's a really nice way to make income by selling options. A lot of people don't realize, they probably don't even know that this exists. I didn't know up to, I guess, about 10 or 12 years ago when I first started selling options. I also have a membership if you're curious about it. I have 3 tiers. All 3 now are currently open. One is you can try it for free for a week. The other 2 include Discord, where you do have to pay to join those 2, but the Discord's getting fairly active. Even my Patreon, there's trades. It goes back now 3 years, so there's literally probably 600-700 posts. And I also post my planning worksheets, my workbooks, anything I discuss in the videos. I also share within Patreon, and in Discord, other people are sharing their trades too, and critiquing my trades as well as other people's. And a lot of discussions. Well, should we do this? Should we do that? So I encourage you to take a look. It may be worth your while. That being said, let's jump into the next section. Okay, now I've got the option chain in Fidelity. I'm looking at IWM, which is the Russell 2000. This is like I mentioned before, this is the only type of trade I will make in order just to earn cash. And typically I like to do these anywhere from 20 to a 10 delta, usually defaulting to around a 15 delta. Now, you can see here, delta's listed. If I come up and select a delta right around a 15, you can see here, here's the 15 delta. You're talking 196, and the current price is 201. So it's pretty close to it. And that, if I went a little higher to an 18 delta, you're talking 197. So it's pretty close. I mean, could IWM get to 197? It very well could. So I don't really want to go to June 21st. Now, if I look at July, the farther I go out, the lower the strike price I can choose, and look at the same type of delta. So here again, let's scroll down to delta in that area. So here we've got 13, 14, and 16 deltas. This is for July 19th. And the 16 delta is right around 104, 106, right at 191. The 18 delta is 119 to 121. And the right at a 20 delta is at 193. So you can see within a couple of dollars of each other. And again, the price of IWM is currently 201. So that's like $10 away. It's a little bit safer. Could it move that much in a month? Yeah, it definitely could, especially if we go through a bit of a correction. But I'm fairly comfortable. I've done enough of these trades that I'm probably not going to go with 193. I may go with 191 or 192. So typically what I would do next is jump into the trader page. And here you can see I've got July 19th. And over here, I'll start with the 192, which was the 192 was the 18 delta. And then for that, I'd bring in 118. And if I did a $10 delta, or not delta, a $10 spread. So I go out $10, which would put me around 182. You're seeing here, I could pick up around $82. And I typically like to keep it no wider than a $10 spread. So if I go to 183, I may see, well, that just reduced it by 3 cents. What if I do 184? Then here we go. We can see that it's going down each time I change it. So sometimes you'll find that that doesn't move at all. I've actually gone from like a $10 spread to a $9 or $8 spread, and actually I've made more money that way. You know, it'd be like when I select this 185, this price here would go down to 41. Now this is saying for $69, and it's a $7 spread. So for $700, I can make 69. So to me, I prefer to make trades per contract closer to $100. So let's go back to the 182, which makes it like a $10 delta. This is only for a month. It's 30 days expiring. It's a little over a month. I think it's like 33 days or 35 days. And it would expire on July 19th. You can see here, I could have selected different strategies. I could have said close the position, so I can do more. Here it gives me a little bit of an analysis of where currently the Russell 2000 stands. I believe it was down more earlier in the day. And then here I have buy to open. So I'm going to buy to open 2 contracts, 2 put contracts expiring on July 19th. I'm going to pay 182. So this is the protection. If it goes below 182, meaning what if we go through a crash and the market dives to 140, I'm limited at 182. I will not lose anything more than that $10 spread. So typically the amount of money at risk is for each contract, it's the $10 spread times 100. So it's $10 times 100. So 1,000 minus the 82 here, which is $82. Now, one thing I could do, which I typically have in Fidelity, because by default, if I did the net bid, it's almost like the market. It'll be fired off right away. A lot of times I'll pick the midpoint and I may go a little bit higher, which only $1 higher, which let's do that, the net ask. So that's $167.50. It's not quite at the $200 that I typically like, but again, I'm going for a shorter period of time. I'm going to set this to cash since I do have cash available. And then at this point, I can do preview order. I got to do it on margin, and that doesn't really matter. I don't need the margin. It's just kind of one of those nuances with Fidelity. So now I can say preview the order, and it's saying 167.40, and you can. It's always a good idea to check and be sure everything looks correctly. So buy to open 2 contracts, July 19th, 2024, 182 is to put on purchasing, and then I'm selling 2 contracts. So someone's buying the opportunity to sell me these shares at 192, and then I'm doing 2 contracts. I just kind of look over everything. I have made mistakes. I've reversed trades before. I've had members who, I had one member that somehow hit the 1 multiple times. So instead of doing like 1 contract, this individual did I think over 100 contracts. So you have to really check this and take your time. Right now, it's still kind of guaranteed. Now, since I did a limit order and I picked the higher end of the limit order, this very well may not go through. So now I can say place the order, and it just says the order was received. I can click over here, manage orders. And then you can see it's still open. Now, if I wanted to change that and make it go through, I can open it again. And here again, I can mess with this bid and ask. So say I put it at 82, which is the midpoint. I can attempt to replace it. Now I can place the order. Now I typically will close this and then I'll refresh here to see if it gets fired. And this time it did. So I made 230 and I spent 690, which isn't bad. So that's what it looks like. I also wanted to mention that with the option chain, if I had gone farther out, like if I had picked well, let's go out. I'll show you a pretty major example. So if I had picked October 20th, and let's get rid of the July 19th, you can see a major impact on the option chain. Hopefully this comes back. It may be because I clicked 2 things. There we go. So it's coming back with September 20th. You remember I just did a 192, 182. Now, if I wanted to do the same kind of delta, and again, I'm looking at delta over here on the right, if I did a 15 delta, it'd be 182. And then the other thing you'll notice is it's 209 to 212. So the amount of premium is doubled. And then if I did $10 out in the spread, I would go look at the 172, which here there's no 172, but I could do the 175, or I could do a 170, 180. Or if I wanted to do a cash secured put, I could just go with the 182 directly, which would bring in $209. But the farther your expiration, the lower strike price you can use, and typically the higher the premium you can pick up. Just something to keep in mind, and that's partially why I go a little bit farther out. Just wanted to share that additional piece with you guys. So hope you enjoyed that. As always, if you have any questions or comments or concerns, please leave a comment below. I typically will respond to them within 24, 48 hours. And as always, thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.